Hey everybody, it's Bob Ost, and it's Friday. It's March 8th, and this is our 197th consecutive week of TRU Community Gatherings, something that we started in 2020, April 17th, 2020. Originally, it was a response to COVID. It was because we all felt isolated and we're going nuts, and this just seemed like an opportunity to actually bring people together. Um, I, I never knew what Zoom was. I kind of was allergic to virtual before 2020. I was literally not interested at all in it. I had somebody in my group who kept saying you should go virtual because you can become like a global presence. And I'm thinking, we're going to become a global presence? Are you kidding? What? What are you talking about? We're a small little arts organization in New York. Well, as it turned out, because of COVID, thank you, COVID, because of COVID, we opened up a Zoom room and suddenly I have people coming in from all over the country, all over Canada and Europe, UK, Australia. We got a whole coterie of people from Australia who come and visit us. And for them, when they come, and we're doing this at 5:30 New York time, it's like 7 o'clock in the morning for them. But it's like crazy, and I love it, and I that's one of the reasons why I'm going to keep doing this thing, this crazy thing on Fridays. Conversations obviously have changed over 4 years. At first, we were just bemoaning the fact that we couldn't have live performance. Now we have live performance, and we're bemoaning the fact that people aren't coming to the theater. So basically, you know, you have your ups, you have your downs, no matter what the time period is. I mean, there were actually positive things that happened during shutdown. Hopefully, we're going to have something a little closer to what we used to know in terms of live theater and live performance. But we've been having conversations as if things are normal. We've been having conversations just assuming that we're back in live performance. And today I have a couple guests who I actually adore them. They're one of them's on my board, so I better like him. And the other one, who you just saw on screen, Ariel, we're actually collaborating with him on a play. Um, and I guess one of the other things that happened during the 4 years of COVID is I think we all became a little bit more conscious of the need for diversity and the need for inclusion. Um, it was a very painful period for all of us, and basically, we, at least for me, I saw the world much more clearly than I'd ever seen when we're not in isolation. We're in our apartments, and things are happening, and we just couldn't turn away from them. So I can't. I think I was always conscious of the need for diversity, but the 4 years that we've been in isolation and the things that have happened during that period of time have made me just crazily concerned about offering opportunities for more people, and having theater actually represent the population that we see around us. So I'm going to bring on Ariel and Scott. Ariel is the what is your title?
I'm the producing artistic director and founder of Leviathan Lab. We are a very small, under 150K theater company that we've been around since about 2009. And I can go into a longer origin story for us, but we are a creative studio for Asian and Asian American, Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander theater artists. We've been around since 2009, so we've had some really wonderful folks that have come through our programs, notably Susan Stanton, who we helped to do a bunch of her early work, and of course she went on to do wonderful things off Broadway and on a little show called Succession. Mark De La Cruz, who is in a little Shakespeare thing with us in A Hole in the Wall, 4-person Julius Caesar, and now he's doing Hamilton every night on Broadway, right? And the work that we've done over the years is just we've have we can just point like direct lines from people doing their early work with us. And then going on, we're often some of the first work that an early career AANHPI artist receives in the city. And I've been also doing a lot of work in the last 3 or 4 years or so, particularly with the new racial freedom work that has been happening over the pandemic, thanks to the murder of George Floyd, that have been trying to position us as leaders within not only the AANHPI community, but within the theaters of color itself, right? And theater practitioners of color.
I'd like you to actually repeat the anagram. Is it an anagram? What is it now?
Yeah, AANHPI is now
This
like
is the current. This is the current.
This is the current parlance, right?
Yeah.
And it's these things, you know, identities and the needs for communities change, right? So I'm caught like for a while it was Asian American, and now it's AANHPI, which means Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander. But we also, like, I've had several Asian national artists that I've worked with as well, right? And help them to get some of their first work here in the country, much less the industry, right? So it's been, we've been working to be inclusive within our own communities, right? And really, if you think about the Asian American moniker in the first place, it really is rather arbitrary, right? Because it was the term Asian American itself was created just to was created partly in response to the fact that, like, well, white folks sort of think all of us look the same. So our issues ended up being largely aggregated. But within this work that I've done, right, in not only for the Asian community, but for folks of color in general, one part of my work was that some of you know me from my work at Equity. I was there for over most of the pandemic, actually all of the pandemic, as part of the 2-person diversity and inclusion team there with my dear friend and colleague, Bliss Griffin, when I was there, right? A lot of the work that I've done during that time is to disaggregate, right? And there's a very funny saying that with that called disaggregation is sexy, right? Because right, when you aggregate everybody, it ends up glossing over like real issues of community that happen, right? And real, like, for example, you know, Asian Americans as a group are the fastest growing poverty level in the country, right? But people don't necessarily think that, or at least the white quote unquote majority usually doesn't think that, right?
Well, I want to actually, I want to help people along with some of this a little bit, because on your website it says Asian and Asian American, which made me realize the same problem that we've always had with the phrase African American. A lot of people who are Black are not African American. They don't necessarily relate to that. They're Caribbean. They can be Caribbean American. They can be relating to African and not necessarily relating to. I mean, we basically. Language is very difficult for all of us, and I think that was like one of the first big lessons I got in bringing you into this was I took Asian and Asian American off of your website, and then I said, well, no, I think we have to do AAPI because we now all know that it's Asian American and Pacific Islander, and then you said AAHNPI.
Yeah, like, and that's largely because of that really started coming into the parlance like really since the Maui fires, right?
Oh,
because it's not. I mean, the Native Hawaiians have been screwed ever since. Have been screwed forever, and largely sort of ignored in terms of the Asian American theater scene. But if it's the only state in the union that has a majority Asian population. If we still, although the 1% white people that live there still have all the power and money, so which they have a huge chip on their shoulder for, right? Which stands to reason they would. Hi, this is Dee Dee.
Hello.
That's Didi. He and Gogo will probably make an appearance.
I'm going to do a whole series of these podcasts where cats are walking across the screen. It's you.
That would be
So
the
far, it's
best
you and
podcast ever.
Jennifer Manacharian. Jennifer Manacharian's cat dominated the entire conversation.
Anyway, Bob, that was a very long answer to to your question
That's okay.
about.
I
But
wish your
it laid
attempt to be brief.
it laid a lot of groundwork, and I think it started off by sort of giving people a little bit of idea of where we were trying to go with this conversation. I want to move to Scott though. Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us how you got connected with Leviathan Lab.
Sure, sure. Well, Scott Sickles, I am I have an incredibly extensive alphabet. I am LGBTQ plus NDA DHD and AANHPI mixed Korean. So yeah, so I'm basically a walking barcode. But
And you actually have I think you've covered all of the letters of the alphabet. That's wonderful.
most of them, yeah, yeah. It's very few have been left behind. And of course, the ones that have been left behind are angry about it. But
No letter will be left behind.
no
Yes.
letter, yeah. But what's interesting about growing up, my mother was Korean, my father was white, of mostly German ancestry, and I always identified as Asian American because my mother was Asian and my father's American because American, growing up in the 70s meant white. And then you realize after a while, probably in adulthood, that no, American is a very diverse thing, but a lot of people, there's a thing on the right wing. If you're something American, then you're not American, you're that something. If you're Asian American, you're Asian. Americans are white. And that's even with Asian American, I remember looking up Asian American Emmy winners for Best Actor. The first Asian American Emmy winner for Best Actor in a comedy series was Danny Thomas. He's from Lebanon. Danny Thomas is white, but Lebanon is Asian. And then it's an Asian American, I think, really is a response to the term Oriental, which is no longer accepted in use. And that referred specifically to East Asians, not South Asians, like people from India and Pakistan in that area and the subcontinent.
Southeast Asians like me.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing because Aaron and I were just talking about the Philippines is East Asia, even though it's not even though it's Pacific Islands, it's not considered Pacific Islander for whatever distinction I don't understand, but you may. But yeah, it's okay. There you go. But it is a complex it's a complex thing. So Asian American is a very widespread thing. And Siberians are Asian Americans, because they're in Asia, or from Asia. But that's the thing. And Siberians are essentially white generally. So there is, so that's where nationality is important, and it's a different background. For instance, two examples right now. I'm watching Shogun, which has a lot of Japanese faces in it. They're Japanese people. And there is, and you can tell just by looking, at even though all the faces are different, there is a commonality. Whereas if you watch the film Memoirs of a Geisha, there's one person in that movie who looks very different from all the others, and it's because she's the only Japanese actor in this movie about Japanese culture. Everyone, Michelle Yeoh and Zhang Ziyi, they're from different, like Malaysia and China, and you have this one supporting character from Japan who was the only person in the entire damn movie with a round face. So it's just you can see that there's different physiology, different aspects of culture, different things we understand, and even in casting the play we're going to talk about, my play Marianas Trench, there are three generations of men of Asian descent. There's one who was originally from North Korea, another who was American born with a Korean father, and then the youngest is the youngest Teddy, who is a mixed Asian. And we don't at this juncture I think we've cast over the first the 5 years or 6 years I've been working on this play. all the people who've been working that, I think we've had 2 to 3 Koreans. Mike Benzinger was one, and Jin S. Kim is now in it. But yeah, but because there is a sort of, there's a blanket East Asian casting when it comes to it because of at this level availability. You cast who you have, and you cast the best people for the role. And sometimes the best person for the role is not exactly, does not meet up with, it meets the sort of regional ethnicity, but not the national identity. And therefore, John Okabayashi is in our cast. He is obviously of Japanese descent. And we just lost Nicholas Jensen, who was Chinese, right, or from Hong Kong. And we're looking to replace him. But there's so there is this sort of double edge where I think when you cast with a big budget, you can afford to pay more attention and have and more fealty to the national identities, whereas we are we don't have millions upon millions of dollars. And
I was a very naive producer. I was producing a musical, The Romance of the Western Chamber, which was based on the classic 9th century Chinese play. And I started off as like, well, of course we're going to cast this Chinese. We saw like 50 or more people, and we ultimately, it's the same thing. We didn't have the money to keep casting and looking. So I think the leading man was Chinese. The leading lady was Filipino, and it was mixed. It was Asian, and I felt like I was kind of betraying my original goal, but I don't know what else. I don't know what else I could have done at that point. But we got a great cast.
Yeah, and there we have the best intentions and we have the best ideals, but we also have to live in the world, and the show must go on.
Yeah.
And
also, just some people are not available.
yeah, well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
There's I actually saw a short play once that dealt with Asian casting, and one of the criticisms they had was that and when it is time to cast the Asians, well, all the best ones are not available. And that was a criticism of like casting people, people casting, non-Asians in Asian roles, or not casting Asians when they could have, because the better actors the better Asian actors are not available. And they were like,
Yeah, it's hard
about that.
to get. It's sometimes hard to get Mickey
Well,
Rooney.
yeah, the truth of the matter is the better Asian actors are frequently not available because they're the best and they are working. And that's the problem sometimes. And you work with the best people you can find. And sometimes the better Asian actors are available and you pounce on them.
Well, the whole reason I decided I wanted to produce that particular piece was because I specifically wanted to give Asian artists an opportunity to work. And I wasn't seeing a lot of it happening. And so my intentions were good, even though I wasn't able to cast Chinese. It was all Asian actors. They were all Asian.
Yeah, and close enough sometimes.
And that was 11 jobs. So I did my part. It's a very frustrating thing. The thing that we need to really mention here is the fact that I may be wrong in my percentages, but I believe the lowest percentage of working artists in commercial theater, the lowest percentage other than Indigenous American is Asian. I believe that's the case.
MENA actors are slightly old, Middle Eastern, North African. I believe I'd have to look at the APAC. If you guys don't know that organization, the Asian American Performers Action Committee, every 2 years, they've managed to garner funding every 2-3 years or so to do. I'll put that link in the chat in a second, but they do a pretty wonderful analysis of both of off, not only the off-Broadway and Broadway scene, but they also measure equity, diversity, and inclusion in the regional theaters as well. And they measure in terms of stage managers, playwrights, directors, and actors, right? Oh, and designers actually as well. And I believe, at least for actors, because that's the one I'm usually most concerned about, is 0.606 actually for MENA actors. And depending on the year, it's anywhere from 3 to 6%, 2.6 to 3% average for Asian American actors.
That's also what I had thought about that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand. Can you explain that? Can you justify that in some way? Why is our business like this?
Good question. Good question, especially when you consider that that Asians in New York, I used to do some work with a group called, at the time, called 15% and Growing. Now it's 18% and growing in the 4 years that I've been working with them. We comprise 18% of the population, and it's getting bigger all the time. And yet, in terms of employment on Broadway and off Broadway, we only get three, and if we're lucky, 6%. Like in a year like Here Lies Love, right, or K-pop, we're going to get about 6%. But that's rare, relatively rare, right? And there's
did any of this feed your ambition to open up your company?
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
What,
I mean,
tell
there's
us what led there.
Sure.
What led you there?
It was mostly because, partly honestly, is because I was like, why am I not getting cast? And I wanted to, like,
Fair enough,
figure out what that was, right? Also, it's as the some of you may know that there are three, or may not, because outside of my very small community, Asian American community, I always forget that, like, not that many people know about this weird niche thing that we do, particularly if you're an even smaller niche community. But there are three off-Broadway theater, Asian American theater companies right now that work on an off-Broadway contract. Pan Asian Repertory, who I do a fair amount of work with. I'm doing their social media right now. I'm likely going to be doing some producing work for them at some point in the future. They they're sort of the oldest. They've been around for 47 years, right? And they're the second oldest, actually the third oldest in the country, right? After East West Players in LA, right? And then the now defunct Asian American Theater Company in San Francisco, who was the first. And then there's Mayi Theater Company, who's done very well, right? And NATCO, National Asian American Theater Company, both of whom do pretty interesting partnerships, right? Which, in a model that I think, well, I don't think a lot of other theaters of color have done quite yet. And I'm sad about that, but but partly it's been necessity, right? We just don't. You asked earlier about, like, why does this happen, right? Well, there isn't an audience for that we can find for it yet, right? That is consistent, right? So, you get things like Here Lies Love, which I have many friends on, both the producing team and the creative team on, right? But there was plenty to take issue with in terms of the politics of the show, right? Which to be fair, they did a pretty good job of trying to mitigate, right? In terms of, but they've also, you've got to show that, like, they were basically trying to, it was a show created by white people about Asian folks. So it wasn't, and then we've had K-pop, which was, again, another show mostly created by white people about Asian folks, right? So there's not a lot of, to me, that's one of the biggest things, right? We don't have any Asian voices right now that have been allowed to be in the room to create things that we would actually come to, right? What that would be, we don't know yet. We're still trying to figure that out, right? Culturally, it's been difficult as well, because it's not a culture that generally values theater, right? And that's changing as we go along, right? And it's changing as, like, even as demographics change, and, like, how much money people bring into the country as when they immigrate here changes. It changes. It's like Vietnamese now are becoming a huge force in the theater world. It's also different from region to region. The Hmong in community in Minneapolis has a very thriving theater scene there, right? So and then San Francisco is a huge theater scene there, right? In sort of their indie theater scene, right? With several Asian American theater companies operating out of there right now. I can name about 3 or 4 that are operating in the San Francisco area right now, and there's likely more, right?
I want to bring it back to Scott, because we never got the answer to the question of how did you find your way to Leviathan Lab?
A friend of mine introduced me online to Alex Chester Blank, who runs Mixed Asian Media and the Mixed Asian Media Festival, and we did a virtual reading one year of the third play, the play that Ariel is now producing, Marianas Trench, is the first in a trilogy. And the third play in that is called The Known Universe, and we did a reading of that particular play, a virtual reading for Mixed Asian Media, and then we did I think was it? Yeah, but it was one of the 2 other plays. But then we did a live in-person reading of Marianas Trench in 2 years ago, or 2 festivals ago, at Prime Produce Collective. And that's where, and I think Aaron and I, we kind of knew each other before that, but that's when, that's when Ariel saw the piece and had a very visceral reaction to it.
It was one of those magical moments when it's sort of like, I was like, I have to produce this play. Everybody knows the moment in August Osage County when the daughter basically attacks the mother finally, and everybody's cheering in the audience, right? I remember my reaction at that was just like, I yelled, yes, that's what you get, that's what you get. And I was like, oh my God, I came out of my mouth completely involuntarily. And I realized everybody in the audience was doing that too. So it wasn't just me. And then I had a similar reaction to a moment, spoilers, in that I don't want to spoil actually.
That's fine.
Scott's play, and I was like, I have to. And unfortunately, I was the only person in the room doing that. Although there were some.
I was going to say, this time you were alone. But there is a moment where our young protagonist stands up for himself to the person who is belittling them most, and I'm watching, and then all this next thing I know, I hear yes, and it was like, yeah, okay, good.
I was fun.
And it turned out to be the guy who's the producer, so even better. So yeah, and as such, we've been working with Janet Bentley. We've been working with them to get it on its feet for about 1.5 years, and now we're finally in the home stretch of that pre-production process.
Yeah. I like the way the cat stretched when you said home stretch.
Yeah, we planned it that way. It's all sublime choreography. Yes. Oh, don't talk us. And
we're producing it at a very, very beautiful new block and relatively affordable white box space called, some of you may already know this company, Alchemical Studios. They recently just renovated their space, and it has a really gorgeous new white box, and which is going to provide us the opportunity to take advantage of Janet's amazing work as a projectionist, projection designer in there. So we're going to be able to project on all 4 walls, which reminds me, I need to actually rent some projectors.
It's an interesting process, because we're presenting this play that is in and of itself is very epic in scope, but told from a very, very intimate point of view. And we're trying to find the space that can convey that sort of intimacy as best as possible, and I think we found it. So yeah.
I've actually never seen the space. I know of it though. I have heard of it.
Absolutely.
So it's good to know, since we're collaborating
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
way. It's so basically
Bob is and TRU Diversity is lending their fantastic name and reputation to as a top line producer. Just like he's on my cat is top line producer on me right now. But as for the piece, and we really appreciate TRU's support on it, TRU Diversity
Absolutely.
support on it, which, and I hope, sort of a longer support of like other of other shows of color, and I'm happy to connect you with more theater companies that that you could possibly work with, because one of the things that I'm
That'd be great.
noticing
Yeah.
in the industry right now, or at least with the indie scene, right? And I'll put this article in there, but people see there's a lot of response right now to like both how expensive theater has just become and the shortage of affordable spaces, right? Rehearsal space is now exorbitant, right? And even 99 seat spaces are few and far between now, right? This is and in many ways it's going back to ouch, sorry. In many ways it's going back to what it was a little bit in the 70s, as we all can remember theater back then, right? People were doing things in little holes in the wall and in their apartments, right? In basements, right? And we have to go back to that.
I had to close. I had to close the show of mine because there's no air conditioning. There was no heat in the winter.
Right. Right, and it's we're and of course none of these are union approved. So, but the thing is that we're like we all know the challenges right now are to produce are extreme, right? And we don't. It's either, and this is partly by design, right? Because it's either New York has created this, and I'm not going to point any fingers because there's a lot of fingers. I don't think I have enough fingers, but there are a lot of fingers to sort of point to why that basically you can only do off Broadway and Broadway, and it's very difficult to do indie theater. And I've stopped calling it off Broadway because I just hate centering Broadway in that way, right?
Yeah, I've been advocating for 20 years now for indie for calling it indie theater.
Right, and it's just
back in the days of Martin Denton. Martin was like one of the first people.
I loved Martin. Anyway, we don't not wanting to center Broadway and sort of center the extreme hunt for money and product, right? That ends up making things very frustrating, actually.
Well, I mean, also the whole. Are you still talking about the off Broadway branding? I mean, it basically off. It's like you would have a meal that somebody's calling off, but why do we have an entire art movement?
That's like when you see the C rating outside the restaurants. Yeah,
that's
an off restaurant.
I mean, look, I want to make money as much as anybody else, but it's but it shouldn't be. But there's as we all know, the showcase agreement that's impossible to make money off of it, right? So because it's specifically for development. But I remember back in the day, we all usually it was a pathway to possibly bring something all the way up, right, to Broadway level. Although I don't know, the last thing that I've heard that did that was Urinetown. Unless anybody knows of anything
from the Fringe,
since then, right? But I don't know of anything since then that's actually done that.
Nothing springs to mind. I think there was like one or two, something might have, but yeah, there's because I think it was Ariel Tepper who had this like the Summer Play Festival, who everything started off as sort of like an indie kind of production, and some things moved, but that was a long time ago.
It also was because Ariel Tepper helped it to move.
Yeah, well, that was the reason. Yeah.
It was I think it was the only festival that you didn't have to pay to be part of, because she was supporting that festival. I think she only managed to get through two seasons, maybe three. Anybody remember?
I don't remember. It's so long ago.
It just wasn't. It wasn't paying. So Ariel, you said something about off Broadway becoming so much harder than off Broadway or Broadway. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I could. There's even a comparison. All it's all hard. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all not affordable. The off Broadway model no longer works. There is no off Broadway. The only way somebody can do something off Broadway, basically, right now, is if they partner with a not for profit.
Yep. Which is exactly why, like, say, Natco and Penny and Mayi have done exactly that, right? They either, or even I sit on the board of Musical Theater Factory, right? Same thing. For the longest time, they had a partnership with Playwrights Horizons, right? And then oh my goodness, Labyrinth had a long partnership with the public, for example, right? I don't think that partnership is still extant, right? But I think it's a good working model that works, but I don't know. There's not a lot of like permanent like homes for like smaller off-Broadway companies now, because the economic reality right now is that even these larger off-Broadway companies can't support those smaller ones anymore. So we are, and hopefully this audience can figure this out. But
Yes,
we're in a desperate need of new models, right? Something that's actually, and you mentioned about like how over the pandemic, how we were been needing to, how we worked towards greater equity and inclusion for folks, right? But as we are entering back into sort of live theater again, the economic realities, and any person of color can tell you this, but usually every time you make 10 steps forward, you take 20 steps back, right? And the more steps you take forward, and we took a lot of steps forward during the pandemic, right?
well, this can be a political
backlash is always
conversation.
really
Yeah, the political backlash.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would. I don't think I would attribute it to the arts or to the theater industry necessarily, but politically, we're really in shit right now.
Well, I mean, economically, it's certain. Like, I'm sure some of you have been keeping up with just how much there's a funding desert right now, right, for theater companies, and we had like, of course, the mayor just cut like 18% off of the arts budget, right? And and many of you probably know people whose budgets have been cut, right? So it's a disaster. It's a disaster. Like a quarter of our basically almost a quarter of our theater companies are now fundless, right? And then this ends up hurting theater companies of color in particular, right? Because they don't. I just attended something with the Mellon Foundation real recently. I attended a funding workshop that the Mellon Foundation put on, and they basically said, just statistically, theater companies of color are funded by the government, mostly by government grants, and white theater companies and theater companies that have been around for a long time have been funded specifically by foundations, right? And those are sort of larger white-led companies, right? But this, I will say that this 18% sort of like got everybody. This 18% cut got a lot of people, right? White theater companies and theater companies of color alike, right? And it's been, again, we need some new models, right?
Yeah.
I think what indie theater is doing, like actually moving out of the theater, is great. We'll see how long equity puts up with it, because they
moving into non-traditional spaces, are you talking about? Or
yeah, to the non-traditional spaces, because it's just like, if they, technically equity wouldn't allow that because it doesn't have bathrooms, it doesn't have dressing rooms, it's not technically safe, because it's all that stuff that they require for even a showcase agreement, right? Which we sometimes pay attention to and sometimes don't. I always do.
I'll trim. I was gonna say I'll trim that out when I post it on YouTube.
If equity didn't want us to rebel against it, maybe it should provide us fewer reasons to.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's interesting. I mean, like I was just in LA real recently, and the indie scene there is thriving. This to be, although despite the fact that equity made them all go to like minimum wage per hour, right?
Mhm.
Which was difficult. Like, is if some of you may remember that, like many, like the equity members that were in LA threatened to secede from the union and create their own. If people remember that, and
Yeah.
somehow equity talked them down, talked them down from it, and they were able to get uh, uh, the hourly wage up. However, they were able to concede to give them more performances, right? They're allowed like up to 60 performances, I believe, right? As opposed to our measly 12 performances, right? Which we wouldn't be able to produce anyway, because I mean, Scott, even with a relatively affordable space like Alchemical, I mean, we're talking double digits that we're spending for rental, right? So it's it's not it's not possible to be able to do that, as opposed to say LA, where they've got a lot of well, there's a lot of people with film money who've like bought lofts and warehouses out in that they're able to like convert into theaters, right?
I think I need to catch up on the LA. I mean, I was very conscious of when LA LA's showcase code suddenly was. I mean, they didn't have a showcase code. They actually were able to do things with 60 performances in relatively large houses. With I mean, there were very little restrictions. All of a sudden, equity got wind of it, and they tried to impose the showcase code on LA. That's as far as I got with the story. So you're telling me that since then things have loosened up a little? Because I haven't been hearing that there's a thriving theater scene in LA.
It's pretty, the things that are being done there are pretty interesting, right? Of course, it's not, it's LA, right? So they're not a theater town, but there's a lot going on. There's a relative amount going on, and they've managed to sort of like absorb what equity has made them do in terms of like getting the doing minimum wage. But of course, everything's funded there by the film industry, right?
Mhm.
So you get actors who are like, and playwrights who are also screenwriters, and get residual checks, right? Screenwriters or actors who have done a commercial or something, or have a TV series, or even have done lots of guest stars, and they are getting, they don't necessarily have to work more than a part-time job, right? So these are, the economics are different there, and it enables them to be able to do things that I think that we can't do here, like at all, because space is just so prohibitive. Anyway.
Actually, this reminds me of something I wanted to shift over to Scott, because Scott is one of the few writers in my circle who actually earns a living. So,
Not in the theater.
Not in the theater. Tell them what you do.
No, I'm a scriptwriter for the soap opera General Hospital. I've been there for 12 years.
And how did that come about?
It was an 8-year audition process. I actually celebrated when I had been in the industry for 8 years, because my career had then lasted as long as my audition. But it was a very long process. But in a nutshell, because I can get to the relevant part fairly quickly, but I sort of submitted to their training program a couple of times. My agent submitted me to their training program in the early aughts. I got in 2003. And then I went through a period of like writing different things for them as auditions, mostly not for air, a couple things for air. And then eventually there was the 07-08 writer's strike. And when that ended, some friends of mine at One Life to Live had said, you need to contact the network in order to so you can write another sample, because we have a new head writer, blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, great. And I contacted the network, and they said, oh, we love you, but not right now. Maybe check back in 3 months. And I said, easy come, easy go. And then one of my And then the next thing I know, that person at the network reaches out to me again a few days later and says, well, you know how things can change on a dime in daytime. Can you do it now? And I'm like, sure, I can do it now. I told my friends at the show this, and one of them, who actually came to see the last reading of Marianas Trench, she said to me, "Oh, I'm so glad because I was on the phone with our head writer over the weekend, and I refused to get off the phone until he read the scripts of that you had wrote before that I sent him, I sent him an email with your previous samples, and I refused to get off the phone until he started to read them." And that is the nicest thing anyone will ever.
Oh, we just lost you. Oh, maybe I
sample.
lost
It's a
me.
lot of catch up and then and a lot of research, and then you have a week to
Now
fill
I'm
the position.
frozen. I think I'm losing my. I think something about going on with my
There you are.
internet
You're back.
connection.
Who was I gone away or?
Yeah, but as far as the
No,
recording,
I could hear you.
I heard him all the way through.
Okay, good. Okay,
I'm not sure whether it recorded.
same-
That's what I'm concerned about, but we'll see.
Okay, well, we'll see. But really, as long as Charlene has heard me, that's all I care about.
That's
And,
it. Yeah.
I see a flashing recording button in the left-hand corner.
Okay,
so.
good. So anyway, just to go back a little bit, I'm asked to write this sample, and then by the time I write the sample, the position that I was the script writing position I was going for was filled, and so I'm like just the chat is distracting me. I'm going to close it.
Yeah, I was reading it too.
Huh?
I was reading that too.
Okay, yeah, but no, I wasn't reading. It's just like visually, I have ADHD, and it's just like, oh, people are passing notes. But what had happened was my agent calls and says, Scott, yeah, your mother is Korean, right? I'm like, yes, why? And she said, well, the position at the show has been filled, but there is a position at the Disney Job Bank and the diversity program for a producer training program, and they can just change that to a writer training program for you. And I said, well, do I need to apply for that? She says, no, it's yours. So they wanted me on the show, and they used the diversity training program for producers to hire me because it was lucky that I was of Asian descent, and I was essentially an affirmative action hire. But they changed the producer training program to a writer training program in their diversity wing, and that's how I ended up becoming a trainee at One Life to Live, and then they hired me 51 weeks later. And as a matter of fact, I will be I just realized this month, I think like the 23rd of this month will mark will be the 15th anniversary of my first my first day in daytime television. So
One Life to Live was my very first TV job.
Well,
many years ago, and it became
it is our hometown
on that show.
Yeah,
for a couple years.
Wonderful. I love that show. I was fortunate because it was also my favorite soap, and I got to work on it. I was the last full-time scriptwriter they hired before it was canceled. So you can blame me for that.
I remember I did that. I did some work on that show, and like just some background work, but like In Sync or something. Oh wait, no, yeah, it was In Sync. It was some boy band.
Oh yeah, we
like a guest star on the show.
Guest stars on that show. No, I was there when Lionel Richie guest starred. I wasn't in the studio, but he was on when I was there. Before, because I know we're wrapping up soon, I just did want to say a few words about the play that we're doing. Because Marianas Trench, as you can see,
I wanted to ask you something because I keep meaning to ask you this.
Sure.
When is the performance date? When are you running? When is it?
April 25th, is it?
Yeah, I believe April 26th through May 11th.
Right.
Yeah. And we, if you would like to help us support this show, we actually have an Indiegogo running right now, and I put the link into the chat. Right?
Please.
Yeah, and we are looking to raise about $10,000 for the show, because of course grant funding only goes a certain grant funding and funding from my board only goes a certain amount. So if anything you can give would be greatly appreciated. And as you know, it goes to all the things that the billion things that you end up popping up when you are producing a show.
Yeah.
Things like renting projectors and paying for artists, you know, and making sure that there's enough pencils.
The first show I produced, which was it was a Civil War musical. I didn't put in a line item for wigs and makeup.
Oh,
Things that you learn.
oh,
Yeah. Things that you no longer take for granted ever again after that. But
Oh
yeah.
my goodness.
But,
You never make the same mistake twice.
A
No,
deficit
no,
that looks
there's-
like wigs.
There's so many other mistakes you can make after that, and you will make them all. But Marianas Trench is running from the 26th of April to the 11th of May, and then as I said, it's part of a trilogy. It's the first part of a trilogy. The second play is called Pangea, and that there will be a reading of that on May 5th. Go to El Cinco de Mayo at 6 p.m. And then the following week, the day after we close on May 12th, is the reading of the final play, The Known Universe, at 4 p.m. So we hope that you can see some or any or all of these.
I wish my assistant Jay were here, because Jay's been running a theater party program for us. And I know that we've got something booked for April already. I think the play that Jane Dubin is producing, Still, which she found through the speed date. I think we're doing I don't know what the date is. If Jay were here, we could figure out whether we'll figure out a date. Email me about it and we'll find a date where we can do a true theater party. Susan Crawford has her hand up, but I interrupted you, Scott. Did you want to finish?
Yeah, I do want to talk about the play first of all, and the trilogy itself. But Marianas Trench, the trilogy is the result of me enduring the 2016 presidential election season and all the fascism and anti-intellectualism and homophobia and transphobia and Islamophobia and xenophobia and all the phobia and hatred that came out of the right wing. And there was a lot of discussion as to whether or not the country would be better off if the red states were in their own country and the blue states were the blue states. So my play is set in an alternate 2020. There is no mention of the 45th president. It's an alternate 2020, and to avoid war, that's what has happened. And as a result, people are stuck on the wrong sides of both nations. And so there's the United States and the Confederate States, and the story is told through the point of view of two 11-year-old boys who are in a government-mandated pen pal correspondence in the Confederate States. Why are they doing that? So that they can monitor, so that government can use the children to monitor what their parents are doing and saying. And as a result, from that bit of perfidy, we have this correspondence between these two boys who aren't allowed. They don't see each other. They don't meet, and they just write back and forth. And a love story emerges between the two boys who are dealing with different prejudices. One is in the Confederate States is the son of Muslim refugees. So they are in a constant state of peril because, they're not Christians. They're not allowed to work. And here in in Pittsburgh, where I'm from, is the character Teddy, who is, like me, a half Asian gay child, but, that's where the similarities pretty much end. I always say Teddy is the nerd I wanted to be, not the nerd I was. But but he is dealing with a constant barrage of bullying, mostly from his parents, who want him to be tougher and stronger because the nation is essentially still in a state of Cold War. But as a result, they're just sort of eroding his spirit. And the only thing that he can cling to are his grandfather and this correspondence. And that's the crux of Marianas Trench. Pangea takes place about 27 years later, when the two boys meet as adults, and then the final play, The Known Universe, they are together and have a family, but it's also the last day of habitable life on Earth. So it literally goes from 2020 till the end of the world, and that's the show. So we hope you can see it.
So you don't have anything
Only
planned
part
for
one
after
you've
the end
seen.
of the world, huh?
Yeah.
We could.
Yeah,
Not
okay.
everybody dies, Bob. So there you go. And that's what
Ross,
makes West Side Story a bigger tragedy than Romeo and Juliet. Maria lives.
Yes.
So there you go.
so have there been any questions or comments that we should know about?
There was one.
There's a
Oh, Susan.
comment.
Yeah, Susan Crawford had a comment or a question. You're muted.
Scott, your play sounds absolutely terrifying and just totally real. So I hope it finds a home and lives on until this period is over. My question is, I have a play that's a comedy about a leftist almost professor who unintentionally wins the lottery and the existential angst that brings on. And it was in the Theater for the New Cities Dream Up Festival last year.
Yes.
And so it's looking for, a bigger audience, a new platform, etc., beyond the 5 performances that the festivals give you. And one of the things I thought about was, what would it be like to take this play and bring it to different theater communities? So the Asian American community, the Hispanic community. I first thought of it when we had a TRU meeting with a Latino theater group, Black community, however many there are, different families dealing with this person in their family who wins the lottery. And I just wondered how that sits with you. Is that odd? Do you like the idea, etc.?
Yeah, the thing it's fine with me, but for most of my life, I actually wrote things from sort of I was focusing on primarily on queer stories, gay stories, because I have extreme issues with my heritage due to the relationship I had with my mother. And as a result, I really didn't. I had Marianas Trench. I wrote it in the first draft in 2018. So that means I was 50 at the time, and that was the first time I wrote a full-length play about Asian Americans, because I was not, dealing with that. But with everything that was going on, identity, I realized how important identity was, and that I needed to deal with my bullshit on my time. But the thing that I had learned is that coming to that is when you write a play from a white perspective that can be, as most of mine were, that can be performed by any community. There's sort of like there's a valid attitude where it's like, okay, well, white problems are universal, but Asian problems are Asian and Black problems are Black, and that's the thing. And I think a lot of times, you can, and that's why some people, really. Every now and then, you'll see a casting description that's like, oh, can be played by any race, yeah, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just like sometimes, the race is important. And I think that it really is, I think, up to the theater. If you send them your play and it resonates with this theater of color, and or this LGBTQ theater where it's just like, okay, well, this is something. And if they want to work with you on it and you're willing to work with them on adjusting the perspectives and how, because, it's like, it's not like all Asians or all Black people all react the same way to any circumstance. So, so I think it's worth exploring, but be prepared for pushback.
The other thing I want to add to that, and I don't want it to sound harsh, but we're in a period right now where there's a lot of awareness of the fact that there were many races that are underrepresented in theater, and there's been an extra hard attempt to make more room for them and to make more possibilities for the people whose voices have not been heard before. Yeah. So if I have a theater, if I were Asian or Black or whatever, Latino, and I had a theater, I would tend to give a lot more attention to pieces that had to do with the community that my company is ostensibly representing. And I know for us white writers, it's like, okay, where do we go? And there aren't
Classic.
specific, well, there aren't specific places, but the opportunities aren't as narrow for us. There are so many
Yeah.
places that we can go.
And
But
that's the thing.
my
but-
point, if I could say, my point is, these different communities would deal with this son who wants to not take this money in their various ways. So that's what,
Yeah.
that's my point.
I mean, I think ideally, I think all things being, if all things were equal, that would be great. And if there could be an exchange to see how that story would go. But to Bob's point, and actually to what Ariel was saying before about Here Lies Love, it's and coming from a half white, half Asian background, one of the things that I learned, when I was finally writing about Asian characters is when you are a mixed Asian playwright, and you are suddenly writing about, at the age of 50, about Asian heritage and mixed Asian families and communities, no one is there saying, "Thank God you're finally here." It really is like I'm very, very happy that Ariel loves this play so much and this trilogy so much. But yeah, but it really is. I mean, it is the question of. There are theaters of color trying to tell the stories of people of color, written by people of color, and I think a lot of them. And I was actually advised this when I was applying for a program where I was actually writing a story, a family story that could be, very similarly, these are universal problems, and they could be, you could cast any kind of ethnicity of family, and they would, and it would be similar. And the thing is that so I've approached it from that sort of reversed prism, and where all the colors are unified into a whiteness, and the thing is that what a lot of and I think this goes to the commercialism or the commercial prospects too. A lot of theaters of color and producers of color are looking for the things that that are unique to this community or speak specifically to this community to share with the world, as opposed to what is universal, the universal things that, and how different communities react to it. So I think it's yeah.
I want to add to that that this goes back to what you were saying about casting notices that say can be played by any ethnicity. Well, that's all very well and good, but what that also means is that it wasn't written from a specific point of view. So it's not as relevant. I mean, it's nice that we're giving opportunities to actors of color, but I don't think that necessarily means that the play is going to be geared to that particular population. What would be interesting, Susan, would be if you could find a Latino collaborator, an Asian collaborator, a Black collaborator, and write 3 different versions of that play with them.
Well, I have to jump in there because I know of a playwright whose name I will share with you when we're not recording. But she was having she writes a lot about Africa and Africans in America, and she is a white writer, and has done a lot. She does her research. She has been to Africa many times. She's one of the most fearless people I know. She also has a play about the Taliban because she has she talks to the Taliban. She has friends in the Taliban. So the fucking Taliban. But the thing is that and she's a white writer, and she also feels that any she's the kind of person who says, well, this was this opportunity was for Black playwrights only. That's not equality. This is for Asian playwrights. That's not equality. Anything that is, again, that excludes me is obviously not equality because I'm a white lady. And the thing is that she actually signed a collaboration agreement with a Black playwright, and then and was trying to use that byline to get into Black theaters and Black theater festivals without valuing the collaboration. Now that's an extreme example, and I'm sure that you would do. I'm sure you would value the collaboration. But the thing is that there is an inherent when you say, well, I have this play, but now I'm working on it with a Black writer so that I can make it Blacker, or I can use this or with Asian or Latino writers so that I can include that perspective, there's an inherent exploitativeness to that, that you have to be very careful of, even with the best intentions. It's like, oh, well, I'm just going to piggyback with your talent so that I can get into your theater, because it's excluding me. And you want to be very, very careful of that. The intention, you have to go about that in a very, where it's a true collaboration, where you want to tell this story from this perspective, because that perspective is important to you, not just because you want to tell the story and you think that this perspective is valid. Because again, like I totally understand that perspective, and wanting to promote the universality of your themes. And I think it's, in a situation like you've described, the theme is very universal, but you have to be very cautious as how you move forward to that, because there can be resistance, and it's a valid resistance.
So, but just to put a button on what you just said, my preference would be to bring the play to you or various different theaters and say, do you find resonance in this play for your community and want to do it? Because I would be very wary of shaping the play to different communities, because I'm this white lady from the Upper West Side, and that was who I was writing for when I first wrote it.
You can ask. That's the thing. You
can always ask.
Can always ask. Now, I notice I didn't say there's no harm in asking, because sometimes there is. Sometimes people, it's just like, how dare you ask? And she's like, Jesus Christ, I'm sorry. And the next thing you know, it's just like, people are all over the internet. I'm talking about like,
Friends, I am so sorry, but I do need to
head out.
Take off. I'm meeting a friend of mine at 7.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, let me do a wind up. Susan, I'm going to go
a little bit.
Thank you.
There's no real ending to this conversation, is there?
Just keep going.
So
my play will be in your email.
And I did want to find out whether anybody, Ross, you never saw anything that we didn't answer, right? So I'm going to just thank you guys. I'm going to thank Scott. I want to thank Ariel for being with us today. And I'm going to just talk to my YouTube viewers out there and the podcast viewers when we finally get this edited and we'll put it up for a podcast. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to my community for joining us every week. I appreciate the support of everybody. Coming up with 196 topics to talk about every week is not easy. So I would welcome suggestions of things that you'd like us to talk about, or even guests that you want me to reach out to. I'm fearless. I will reach out to almost anybody. And I have a pretty good yes rate. I only remember the no's, but I have a pretty good yes rate. So let me know. And to those of you out there who have just discovered us, TRU is a nonprofit organization. We're an arts service organization. And we're basically dedicated to helping people understand the business of theater. And we focus on producers. If you want to be part of the conversation, we'd love to have you. So email me at trunltd@aol.com, trunltd@aol.com. We'll invite you every week. And if you'd like to help us keep going and you want to give us a little donation here and there, go to TRU Donate, trudonate.com, trudonate.com. We'd appreciate any help you can give us, because it takes money to keep doing this. Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you in the weeks to come.
Thanks, everyone.